Good afternoon, chess fans. It's going down in the scrapyard. The second of the 1900 bots is on my radar screen. D4 second best by test. Working my way through the chessgot.com bots, the advanced cohort that starts at 1500 and ends at 2100, and then I move on to the quote experts, so-called. Broadcasting to you here from the quiet solitude of my man cave, also known as my battle basement, also known as the scrapyard, along the banks of the muddy and mighty Mississippi River in the Show Me state of Missouri. D4, D5 replying classically. I'm going to enter my same setup. You've seen it before, and you will see it again. D4, knight to F3, E3, bishop E2, castles. If black plays symmetrically, I will have virtually no advantage coming out of the opening. However, I will not be losing. Now, this particular bot, Xavier, rated 1400 from Spain, is allegedly prone to sacrificing material to end the game quickly. Checkmate ends the game. Perfect, because my style of chess is to make my opponents sacrifice their pieces. Javier proceeding in symmetrical style, not what one would expect from someone prone to sacrificing pawns. I do have a delicious beverage. I'm going to try out this Starry Lemon Lime drink here, caffeine free, unfortunately, because I do need some caffeine, although it is in the afternoon. I have ice in my metal cup. This is one of my favorite cups. It is not, however, my big glass Bavarian beer stein. Okay, that is refreshing. Perhaps I'll put it here on my left side, away from the mouse pad. There was a mouse slip yesterday, a devastating one, very late. Late in the endgame, when I'd already acquired an insurmountable advantage, I mouse slipped and lost a whole rook for nothing, but still managed to come out in that game against the bot with a win. It was a 1900er. It was Miguel. All right, second, we know the third move. I've already telegraphed them to you. It's E3, Patzers, E3. And black replies symmetrically. And now, here's the real test, whether it wants to continue symmetrically or not. I will play the signature move, the defining move of the Max Murray opening system, which, as far as I know, I'm the only person who plays this consistently. I've played hundreds of games with bishop to E2, not bishop to D3, placing it on its more active square. And Javier replies with a Shagorin type knight, a Jabavov London type knight, putting his knight in front of his C pawn, pressuring my strong point on D4, but that point is going to be held by me for a very long time, potentially threatening to come knight to B4, pressuring my C2 pawn, often in conjunction with a bishop. This is the way the bots have been playing me, but Javier has already decided to lock his light squared bishop behind his pawn chain, similar to my keeping my dark squared bishop behind the pawn chain. Would the dark squared bishop be better on the long diagonal? Well, that is modern thought, getting the dark squared bishop outside of the pawn chain, and that is the London system, which is all the rage these days. However, before the London system, there was the Colley systems, and more pointedly, the Zukertort Colley system, where I would have placed my bishop, light squared bishop, on the D3 square. Then I would have played B3 and bishop B2. That's the Colley Zukertort. Actually, a very dangerous opening because it's followed by knight to E5, F4, perhaps bringing the queen over, and a whirlwind attack on black's king side. I'm not playing for an attack on black's king side with my system. Almost always my preferable mode of operations is on the queen side of the board. That runs from the A file to the D file for those of you new at chess. All right, I'm going to crunch on the ice right directly into the microphone. There are no high production values here in the battle bunker in the scrapyard. Now, since I've been facing this knight to c6 move quite a lot, I've developed one might call it paranoid sensitivity to potential attacks on my c2 pawn, and that's in fact what I called out the moment I saw this knight coming. I've looked at the opening and studied it and realized there are some antidotes. Sometimes I play c3, but that is not consistent with playing on the queen side. c3 supporting this d-pawn is more consistent with ultimately playing for an e4 break. But I can also play a3, keeping a grip on that b4 square. And when I checked the opening, the computer thought a3 was in fact the best move in a position somewhat similar to this. But what I was checking, however, was an early c5, an exchange against my strong point, then a bishop on f5, and then the knight coming here. And to prevent all that, a3 was the computer's antidote. Since there's no real threat here at all to my queen side, I am going to continue with my system, which I have now completed. Phase 1. Strong point in the center. Develop minor pieces on the king side. King safely tucked away. Rook brought to the center. All opening principles well familiar to the Russian schoolboys and in the Russian school of chess textbooks. Put a pawn in the center and support it with another pawn. The next move in my system, there's several, but the problem, as you can see, are the next priority is for me to develop my queen side. Capablanca said, really the essence of chess is to get all your pieces out as quickly as possible to good squares. And if we can boil down what you must do in the opening, that is the simplest way to put it. Knight came to d6 for black. Bishop for bishop. His bishop on d6 is more active than my bishop on e2. However, after I play this move, c4, now you can see I could worry that bishop. And the bishop has no retreat because black has voluntarily impeded the advancement of his c-pawn when he played 4 knight c6. Now, I've played my opening system hundreds of times. I've essayed this mode of development for my queen side hundreds of times. And I have learned that playing c4, c5, even if it wins a tempo, as it does in this particular instance, does provide black a certain amount of counterplay options, namely in a counterattack against the center of my pawn chain, undermining my pawn on c5. Even if I support the pawn and advance on the queen side, my long-term strategical goal in this opening, the counterplay down a half-open e-file plus potential kingside piece play is dangerous or equalizes for white. Be that all as it may, therefore I'm not going to rush directly into c4. If black decides to play a kind of a, I don't know, Catalan gambit accepted or Queen's gambit accepted type move by playing d takes c, I'll calmly recapture, most likely with the bishop, but even there are other ways to regain that bishop. Sometimes the move is queen to a4, queen takes pawn. Other times, believe it or not, we can go knight to a3 and takes pawn on c4, or we knight to d2 and take pawn on c4. However, I'm going to bring out knights before bishops. I now have one problem child left in my position. The dark squared bishop left behind as he is on the c1 square. He's blocked in with my e-pawn. The one real strategic bummer about my open, kind of a concession I make to myself in exchange for the rapid development in the fast castling and not playing the London, which many people don't like the London and they should thank me for not playing it consistently. I prefer this. The reason why I didn't put my bishop on d3, analogous to black's bishop on d6, is because of tactical vulnerabilities, such as black is facing here after I move c5, pushing his bishop to the only available square currently, e7, but not an unnatural square of development for black's bishop. Another reason for me not to rush, although I do like the cramp. Let's take a quick survey and look at the e5 square, because playing d4 and knight to f3 on 1 and 2 moves 1 and 2 respectively is all about preventing this break e5. Now black is playing for it. Sometimes he does it with a King's Indian style setup. The problem with the break for black is his d5 pawn will not be supported by another pawn. It'll be supported in the center by a piece, and that could become a vulnerability that I can tickle at a certain point. If he were to play e5 now, and that's what I really want to look out, it'd be pawn takes pawn, knight takes pawn, knight takes knight, bishop takes knight, and dust settles with black having a bishop on, excuse me, sorry, the carbonation of the starry lemon lines catching up with me. Black would have a bishop on the e5 square piece. It would not be firmly ensconced there. I could kick it immediately with a move like f4, a double-edged move. Black could try to trade the knight. So already black can play e5 if he does so deign, but then he would undermine again the defense of the d pawn, and I would be able to catch that pawn outright. This move here, e5, therefore loses a pawn, a critical pawn in the center, and even if black now plays rook to e8, putting it on the e file, supporting the advance e5, he's done nothing about this particular pawn. Black could support it by playing knight b4, temporarily doing the duty of this knight, but now he's weakened his own advance. Plus, that knight could easily be kicked by a3. The next order of business for me is to make a decision here about the development of my queen or the continued development of my knight. Now, the queenside sequence of moves usually goes 6. It's usually I'll move 6, c4, then knight to c3, then b3, then bishop b2, and then finally wrapping it all up, rook to c1. That is the perfunctory method by which, in this system, I develop my queenside. I'm looking at this position now, and the bots previously from the 1500s on up have played more hyper-modern style openings and openings that are not as symmetrical. So a challenge I'm having looking at this position, other than he's impeded the advance of his c-pawn, a not small detail by the way, but other than that he's impeding that, he has a very solid position. I believe the way to play here is going to be, he has allowed me the opportunity to gain space with a tempo. So the system here might be to play c5. He drops the knight back, then maybe a3, b4. It's just slightly slow. But first I think I want to develop my queen. Suppose black were to capture my c4 pawn and I take with the bishop. He's now liquidated the weakness, preventing him from advancing e6 to e5. That's important. That literally could be his next move. Pawn takes pawn, bishop takes pawn, e5, pawn takes pawn, knight takes pawn, bishop takes knight, bishop takes knight, dust is settled. I have a pretty strong bishop on c4, but he has a bishop on e5. I might have to use the double-edged sword of playing f4 to knock that bishop out of the center. He simply retreats it back to d6. Then what if I try to leverage the fact that my bishop is on c4 by playing queen b3, also and not incidentally pressurizing his undefended b7 pawn now that his light squared bishop is moving away. However, that whole bishop is biting on granite of this f7 e6 construction, and I would be vulnerable to the knight move. Oh, that knight's gone. This bishop is here. Maybe it could come here. I don't know. We're getting to the murky future. The question I'm really asking myself is, do I want him to allow him to play pawn takes pawn followed by e5, which he may or may not prepare first by playing rook e1? Or do I move the target, chase the bishop, I get a free move, I'm on his side of the board now, and then I continue, as I said, kind of delaying the placement of my queen and my queen side minor pieces and heavy piece for space. And I like a space. Or do I continue with my system, which is b3? If he takes pawn, then I'll play pawn takes pawn. He'll play e5. I can't really take it because that will isolate my pawn on the c file. He may eventually get in e5. I bring the bishop back, usually to d2 in those cases, although sometimes the knight can go to e1. I'm sorry, did I call knights bishops? I do that. I call cats dogs. He does have the beginnings of an attack on the king side, where quite a number of pieces can get in here once he plays the freeing move. Since that move is so freeing for him, do I want to just shut it down completely? And how could I do that? Well, I could play c5. He forces his bishop drop back to e7, only move. Then I could plunk my knight, my pony to e5. Not typically my normal style of play. He plays knight takes knight, maybe to preserve his light squared bishop or not. I take pawn takes knight. Now this knight has to move away. Here perhaps. No, my knight is gone. I don't know. I might be able to do that since a pawn or in this knight doesn't give it a lot of options. A lot of time black wants to drop a knight into e4 on me, follow up with a move like f5, and now two pawns are protecting the knight. I can evict directly by exchanging off the knight or by playing f3 after I remove my f3 knight to d2. If I play b3, he exchanges the pawns. Pawn takes pawn, plays e5. I do something. He plays pawn takes pawn. I play pawn takes pawn. I've got two pawns here, still side by side. Yes, my a2 pawn is isolated and by himself, but I do have compensation in the file next door for my rook. And this is a very difficult pawn for him to target on a2, especially with no egress from his queen. This is the key. This is the key to unlocking the whole position. And I need to think, like, this is preventing the bishop from falling back. This is preventing the queen from coming over to the queen side, which can and does happen. Especially after he plays pawn takes pawn, the queen can swing to the king side attack. we will play. Oh, it's still tough because of this black square domination. It's a little harder for me to advance on the queen side. I'd have to play a very slow move, a3. It is kind of a waiting move to see what black does, but I do believe black is going to wipe out this c4 pawn. I have a half-open file now on c, but look, I got 1, 2, 3 pieces that have to be administrated to first. I have to tend to their needs first before I can wake up the rook slumbering on way a1 to put it on the c. In the meantime, perhaps maybe the queen herself will take over c-file duties with her natural development square on c2. I can't really play c2 yet because knight to b4 is irritating. If I'm going to play a3 here, so I can make a square to develop my knight on c2, and I'm going to allow this, and this, and this. Really difficult decision. In these symmetrical positions, here's the tension. When do you resolve the tension? When it's to your benefit. So, does it make sense that I play pawn takes pawn right now? Pawn takes pawn is good because it requires black to respond to that threat, pawn takes knight, immediately. And for black, it requires black to prioritize regaining the material balance. If he plays pawn takes pawn, that's good for him, sort of, because now he has got the half-open e-file without even having to push the pawn. But he has placed the pawn on a central square here on d5 where it can't be quickly supported in one move by his c-pawn. This may again be the linchpin and the hidden secret of how to deal with this opening he played. I have lost a minor piece that pressures that pawn. I can replace it with a queen on b3, and that would annoy him. Maybe he plays, at that point, queen to c8 to defend the pawn. Now his queen is getting a little bit out of the game. If I play pawn takes pawn and he plays pawn takes pawn or knight takes pawn, and we have... Now I've fairly opened up his light square bishop. It's something I can't prevent anyway. I don't believe there's anything I can do to stop him from opening up this light squared bishop. If I play pawn takes pawn, wow, we could go on all week with this. I don't have to make another move. I could sit here all day and think of this, but I really want to do it with the assistance of databases. So I'm going to play more quickly and intuitively. The fact that he's kind of put his bishop on an awkward square, given me a tempo, and is planning for a break with an attack on my king side, I'm not going to leave this attacking piece. So after all that, this is maybe not the best move in the position. It usually isn't. I'm going to risk weakening my own D strong point, and we're going to play c5. Okay, now I'm going to play a3. It's a multi-purpose move. The first and most obvious purpose to that move is to be able to play b4 and grab all the space on the queen side. The second purpose to it is to ensure that my queen is safe from harassment when she goes to the developmental square on c2. I haven't resolved where I'm going to put this bishop yet. Okay, now he's come knight to e5. This is kind of one of black's other main strategic ideas. To stick this knight into my side and follow up with another pawn. That does bury his light squared bishop, but there's at least 2 inroads into my position. So it is buried but can dig itself out. I don't like knights outposted on my side of the board. If I take here and move my knight back, I can gain kind of a tempo against it. I don't mind necessarily opening the center. I'm virtually ready. Just don't have my rooks connected. But neither does black, and for that matter, black doesn't have a quick way to connect his rooks because his queen currently cannot exit the back rank. He's going to have to reposition this bishop. We will take here. This knight could cause him problems. You see, this again, the knight might be better for me to play here, but I kind of want that hook. But we're going to play thusly. Putting pressure here. Yep. Now, sports fans, chess fans, I think the move here, I'm going to play quickly again. It's against a 1900. I probably shouldn't play this quickly, but I'm going to play f3. And if he allows me to exchange the pawn, now he's got doublers, and I can really start thinking about winning chances. Or at least there's going to be enough imbalance in the position due to the pawn structure, even more than there is already, to give me grist for the mill, so to speak. If I take back, I'll just put my... If I play f3 and he takes with the pawn, I can just put my knight right back where it came from on f3, and now that knight would be eyeing a very juicy square on e5. Perhaps I could exchange the knight off and then come to e5. I also have in this position b4 played right now with the idea of playing b5 next and making this knight uncomfortable. And that knight would either have to come to the rim, which is grim, on the a5 square, or move back to b8, and therefore most likely black is going to respond to b4 by a6. But I'm happy to see a6 on the board because now I have the ability to have a hook here and play for a pawn break. Pawn breaks are really where counterplay comes from. It's where the initiative comes from. Pawn breaks are, I'm going to say this, are the soul of chess. If pawns are the soul of chess, then pawn breaks are the everlasting soul of chess. Question is when. Do I play f3 and deal with the issues in the center, or do I play b4 and start immediately on the queen side? Sorry, I'm chewing the ice. That's very inappropriate and impolite of me. I have not resolved the issue of my dark squared bishop. It's likely he could try to liquidate these doublers and work on the center of my pawn chain by playing e5. Still very much in the cards with him, especially since my light squared bishop is gone, which kind of gives me an idea right now, playing knight c4. If I play f3, he could respond with e5, and then chaos breaks out. His king is on a potentially weak diagonal from a2 to g8 because I can bring a piece with check there, and if it's the queen, she's also double attacking the b7 pawn. If I play f3, on the other hand, I am not weakening the diagonal to my king because I still have 1, 2, 3 pawns doing yeoman's work on that diagonal, and I'm controlling some pretty key squares here due to my advantage in space. I think I'm going to start with b4 because he probably has to respond to that right away before he tries any shenanigans. And if he does try this shenanigans, I will get my bishop to that open diagonal and my rook's connected. So b4 it is. I'm going to then go here. Probably, I just had a thought. Okay, there's a6. That's fine. He's kind of passively responding to my moves. I think the bot would have done better, particularly against a player like me with poor calculation skills, would have done better by creating chaos on the board with a move like e5. The dark square bishop can come to f6 and blunt my bishop on b2. Plus, black would have in the standoff between these two bishops on b2 and f6, black would have the advantage that his bishop is supported not only by a pawn but by a queen and a rook, and my bishop is completely unsupported. I just thought of this, and it's kind of late, and unfortunately it's something that bore some thought, which is my bishop might be needed on this diagonal if I play f3, because it would be guarding the base chain. I want to defend this pawn now, so I can play a4 and thusly, but I also want to connect my rooks, so if the a file does come open, or a file does here, I can slide a rook to it quite easily. We will continue our development instead. Development moves are never really wrong. And black did play f6. Not only is he facing off against my dark squared bishop, but he is supporting a e5 pawn break. Not so much a freeing any maneuver anymore, because his light squared bishop is staring into the backside of his own pawn. I could try to illustrate that to him better by playing a move like g3 and fix this pawn. However, if his knight moves away, it does have a very good square here on d5. Then this bishop has a lot of activity on the a4 e8 diagonal. I have space. I don't know if I have a specific advantage. I have not really punished the blocking of this c pawn. It's not of a large consequence anymore, since he doesn't have to defend the d pawn, and I can't easily target it. I can't put a knight on it very easily, and I can't put a bishop on it really at all. If I break in the center now, I have to be careful with this undefended bishop. I do want to complete my development with the connection of the rooks. Now we could say the opening is over on move 14. He played b5. Now the c7 pawn is backwards, but cannot be attacked frontally due to the presence of my own pawn on c5. The rules of chess say you cannot take your own pieces. It would be interesting variant to have a chess game where you could take your own pieces. Like I could play queen takes pawn here. That would be pretty wild, wouldn't it? My knight stopped from going to c4 by this move. He has again sort of blocked in his light squared bishop, though I'm not sure whether that was the best move. And I would say 90% of the time, 9 times out of 10, en passant is the reply after such a move. That would open the c file for my queen who's sitting here. But black would capture with his own c pawn. Now there's no more pawns. He's got 2 standing together on the a and b file. He's going to bring a rook to the c file where my queen is sitting. I might just leave this situation locked. And what I want to do is liquidate everything and rely on the fact that he has this bad piece. So keep my pieces into the game and lock this light squared bishop out, which is now buried behind, let's count them, 1, 2, 3 pawns bearing this solitary light squared bishop. I need to bring my pieces back into the game, and I plan to do that with activity here. I am protecting the center of my pawn chain. That's interesting. That's an interesting move. It's not something I considered. And I should have, because B4 was the alert that he's trying for activity. Pawn takes pawn, knight takes pawn. Now I'm going to have to do something silly. Either liquidate the potential target and create a target for him on the A file, but that is nicely protected. The knight cannot slot into the recently vacated B4 square. And I have a target here. In fact, I can take that pawn now, can't I? What's wrong with this? Now even if he plays pawn takes, aren't I winning a pawn? His whole sort of threat here is based on the knight covering the B4 square. Okay, so there could be a tactic against my queen. Remember, I talked about the queen on C2 being vulnerable to the knight moving to B4, but the knight could also worry the queen by taking this pawn on D4. And you say, well, wait a minute, I can't take the pawn. You'll just take the knight off. But if I take bishop takes pawn and he plays knight takes pawn, now we've each lost a pawn. I have to respond to this threat against my queen. And if I take pawn takes knight, then bishop takes bishop, and he has restored material equality and he's attacking this bishop. If I move my queen to, say, out of the way, say to C4, the knight can take this bishop, and that's check. Oh no, the bishop is over here. The knight could try to, well, this bishop, okay, this is where my calculation problems, you can see the calculations problems. Here is the squeaky hamster wheel that needs some WD-40, that is my calculation processing, gets into action here. Against a human, I would be leery to take bishop takes pawn, and I would kind of trust that they've already done the calculation for that. However, I'm not playing a human being, I'm playing a robot rated 1900, and the 1500, 1600, 1700 bots have dropped pawns like this to me. Just dropped them. The problem is after, okay, so we're going to calculate it tightly now. Bishop takes pawn. Knight takes pawn. Bishop takes knight. Bishop takes pawn. That's the problem. The problem is, because I was thinking I could go A4, B5. The problem against that bishop, the problem is this rook is at the end of the rainbow for this. So what can I do about that? Bishop takes pawn. Knight takes pawn. Bishop takes bishop. Pawn takes bishop. Pawn takes pawn. Now I have a backwardser. Also, I'm taking pressure off of this. I'm tempted not to try and capture this pawn. I suspect that I might have some tactical justification. Am I all wet? Okay, bishop takes pawn. Knight takes pawn. Queen C4. What does he do after queen C4? knight, or even just bishop takes bishop, right? Yeah. Yeah, I don't think I can grab this pawn. And I don't have to. I think I'm going to take it this way. I don't mind this extracurricular activity out here. I think I have an advantage on the queen side in terms of space and scope for my pieces. And I think I have better chances than he does. So I'm thinking just pawn takes pawn. If he takes knight takes pawn, tries to bury the knight into c4, I'll exchange off my light squared bishop or my knight. If I take pawn takes pawn and he takes rook takes pawn, he's not able to improve the immediate position of his knight, and I still have this move waiting in the wing. So that's what we're going to do. I'd be interested to see what the computer evaluates. He's had to play this move intermezzo. I didn't think he could do that because simply bishop takes pawn, and now I have that knight, this pesky knight, pinned. The rook will move away. My light square bishop on a very strong square covering the entire light square diagonal. There's also knight takes pawn, and I'm still, if I do knight takes pawn, now I'm kind of threatening bishop takes pawn better, because if this suicidal knight move works, it won't because knight takes knight covers my light squared bishop. So he'll have to do something like this. I don't know, it still gets complicated. The reason why Xavier from Spain had to play this move is because he could not tolerate the fact that he would get doubled pawns. One of my ideas, of course, was knight takes pawn, and then to try to stuff these two. And I do like the idea of controlling the square as much as possible, prevent him from freeing this light squared bishop. So the question is, do I want to leave my bishop here on the diagonal that runs from f1 to a6, or do I want to keep move the bishop to the long square diagonal, keeping my knight on d2? But what is my knight really doing on d2? It can't go here, can't go here, could go here, but then I'm staring at my own pawns. So I think this is the correct move, giving my knight scope, retaining the scope from my bishop, and protection of the sensitive c4 square. Note that the tactics along the long dark square diagonal did play a role in all that. I like to avoid these kinds of complications. Black will play, or could try to play, c6. The good news is he's protected the b pawn. The bad news is now the bishop is buried behind not 3 but 4 pawns. Can't find activity along one of the two shortest light square diagonals, but will potentially enter the game by moving to e8 and coming out towards h5, which I could really prevent simply by moving my knight. He does have a backward pawn here. His king is weak on this light diagonal, which may tactically be of importance. Let's look at the dangers of this knight. Here I can exchange it off, and I will. Here I'll just take it. I could put immediate pressure on this pawn, or can I? No, not really, because I can't put my queen anywhere where she's going to not be leading these two squares. Prevent my queen. What if I played knight e5 now, taking advantage of the fact that black's knight is no longer influencing this square? I could get doubled pawns myself. He could play bishop takes knight. Then I take pawn takes bishop. Yes, I have doubled pawns and they're isolated. Yes, but I've really fixed a difficult problem for him on e6 because it blocks his light squared bishop. However, I know as playing black, as being a d6 player with black, I have a pawn on d6. I play 1 d6 against everything as black. You don't really see me playing black against these bots because I've resolved to play white against them until I lose. And I've only lost twice, both times to the 1600 bot, believe it or not, and one time was a train wreck from which I am still suffering PTSD. It was a horrible game for me. Horrible. So, but after that, I beat the 1700s, 1, 2, 3. There was 3 of them. I beat the 1800s, 1, 2, 3. There was 3 of them, and I beat the first 1900, despite a mouse slip losing an entire rook. I don't know if I have much in this position. My knight. Let's do a survey. My knight is okay. My knight says thank you. I'm glad you picked me over the bishop for the f3 square. The rook is grumbling a little bit. The rook was hoping to have more activity along this half-open file, but has been consigned to second place because I want to put a light square bishop, a light square piece on that f3. My dark square bishop, not particularly happy. However, he is defending a potential target in my position along the A file, and he is defending my strong point on D4, which is the corner, the capstone, the cornerstone, the foundation of my entire system. It is the first move, and I put a pawn on D4 for a reason on my first move, because I intend to keep it there. Unless he convinces me to move it with a bad move. And this may be a case where now the freeing move is to play d5. That is the pawn break in the position. Pawn breaks are where the initiative comes from. I won't be able to play it next turn because black will put a white knuckle death grip on the d5 square after he plays c6. Probably try to get his bishop out here. But that, that's not a great square for a pawn in certain regards, because the knight wants to come back that way, 1. And 2, if I get my light square bishop to the long diagonal, then that's a target. I do want to keep my light square bishop on the board with these pawns on the light squares, and I want to get the dark square bishop off. So what about this maneuver then? The idea being what? That I want to exchange the bishop for the knight in the closed position. Huh. This rook needs a better square, and I think I'm going to put the rook on D opposite his queen, and I'm going to pseudo threaten to smash the position open on a potentially highly sensitive D5 square. In my system, if I can get in D5, and this is earlier, of course, in the opening, if I can get in D5, it's usually with effect, and I come out of that with an advantageous position. Let's go here. Okay, didn't consider this. I did think he put a pawn on c6, but instead he's obviously he's made the more logical move of putting a glorified pawn in the person of a bishop onto that square, providing a certain amount of lockdown. But he has problems with even this move, because my knight can come to e5 now, and that's a pseudo threat, number 1. And number 2, if he takes it with the dark squared bishop, again I will have these isolated double pawns my dark square bishop should be able to babysit them. This pawn, I'll have shatter my own queen side. I'll have pawns on all these red squares shattered, but piece activity. And a really good square on d8, and all of a sudden the file has opened for the rook, who will be elated at the news. I'm feeling that position is more or less equal here. I thought I may have a pool, but I really don't know. Is bishop takes knight a threat? No, it just brings my bishop to a pretty good square. But then he might want to put the knight on c4, and I do not want to allow that. I really need to get pressure here. And the way to do that is try to threaten to exchange this. So I'm going to play this. I think it's positionally suspect, but I like the activity. And he did not. Oh, look, he's gone for the own. He's gone for the own weakness in my position quite well here. But he's abandoned the long dark square diagonal, and that is a pawn I can defend in a multiplicity of ways. I can drop the bishop, unconnecting my rooks, but giving the bishop a job. Remember, I talked about the bishop defending this pawn as a potential job earlier. And so much often in my system, the bishop on c1 is defending that pawn. It's bad because it's behind dark squares, but it's good in the sense that it can defend and move around the chain. It's a mobile pawn is what it is. It's a glorified mobile pawn. I take the knight, I take this bishop, and I think, wow, I have a powerful initiative here, because I'm threatening the queen, but then that's check, and that's even bigger initiative. My king goes into the corner. He recaptures my knight with his knight. Now he can't really get in knight c4 the same way, but I've given up a pawn that I might not need to give up at all. This bishop doing nothing against this knight. If I move my bishop here, I've cut off my rooks. I don't think that's critical yet, although it could be with the position opening. But I control the break, not him. So let's just play conservatively. I could move the queen. I really want to put pressure on this pawn, though. I could move the queen to d2. Doubling basically on the d file and protecting the queen, though doing too much work there. She could then come to maybe c3 later, but then what, I can't just let this sit. So I think what we're going to do is we're just going to defend quietly. Okay, good. Yeah, that's not bad. He's evaded me now and moved his bishop to a quite threatening square because it's threatening my queen. It's also putting pressure on g, and he could ride this highway. However, he's left my knight now very well positioned. I do have my trumps too. He has his trumps, I have my trumps. That's what chess is all about. I could pinwheel my knight, my bishop, to f3. I don't want this to come in, but then threatening that I could come back. It's still iffy. It's really kind of iffy. The obvious and most immediate threat is against my queen. Let's look at the squares. I can't take it. I can't go here. I can't remain where I am. Can't go here. I can't go here. But the blue squares, I can go here, here, here. I can't go here. Can't go here. Or I can go here. There. Ooh, that's this. Look, we're going for each other's jugulars. Do you see that? This square is what I call an accelerator move. I wonder if I should go back and forth for a draw, because if I go queen, to a2, he's almost certainly going to retreat the light-squared bishop to d5. And I would go back most likely. Do I want his bishop? I can decide where this bishop is going to be. I can decide whether the bishop is going to reside on e4 or reside on d5 when I play my bishop here. And I want it kind of residing here on because if he gets this in, I'm going to end up with a knight posted, and it's going to be eyeing a very dangerous square. I'm going to end up with a knight here, ladies and gentlemen. I'm thinking now queen c3. I'm thinking the position is starting. It could be difficult for me if I misplay this. And why I would want to put my queen on c3 rather than a2 where it's going to get kicked again is one, because it'll get kicked again. But my queen here provides additional protection to the backwards e6 pawn. There was another reason, but if I can't think about it, I guess it's worrying the knight, but this rook's going nowhere. This is coming, right? I can then read I might just have to what if I draw the reason why I don't want to draw the bishop back to d5 with a tempo is because he will play knight c4, and even if I exchange my light square bishop off, can't quite get it in. It's a delicately balanced situation. Queen c3 doesn't feel good. I'm switching to defending the dark squares. Essentially, it's defensive. It's not doing anything about this. My plan, though, is to drop this b pawn if I can. My queen on c3 is also preventing me from getting rid of this knight on the rim that's dim and grim. My queen on c3 is supporting the rook on a1. That's not a minor detail because I'm thinking about playing a4 at some point, and this a file could come open. What if I put my bishop here? I haven't thought about that. What if I put my bishop here and I say, okay, we'll trade bishop for bishop this way, and that will open up the defense along the second rank for my queen too, which really doesn't want to leave. Frankly, she doesn't want to leave c2. With my bishop here, it comes with a threat because bishop takes bishop, and now I've won a pawn, occupied the long light square diagonal. He's likely to have to move again. Maybe moving off the f wasn't such a smart idea. It's challenging. His knight's a lot more active than I had thought they would from a few minutes ago. If I play bishop d3, he plays bishop takes bishop. I play queen takes. Then he plays knight c4. I can stop it. He may endeavor to try to exchange that knight in post because he's going to eventually get in c6, defending the pawn on b5, and then posting the knight on c4. To me, is the major strategic challenge. He may have to work very hard to get to that square, and if he does, though, there's pressure here. What is my queen doing on c2? Well, she's not doing a hell of a lot with regard to the b and a files. She is providing second rank protection, but can do that equally from the b2 and d2 squares. I don't want to put her on a2 because this bishop d5 move is unpleasant. If I put the queen here on b2, now I've got a double attack against the b4 pawn. Black is likely to respond with c6. Then I'll probably play something like bishop f3 that virtually forces the bishop off. Bishop could play back to here. Bishop takes bishop, pawn takes. Now he's got a triangle. So this is fishing, but I don't believe it'll do anything. I could try to undermine it. The challenge with undermining right at this exact moment of time, undermine it by playing a3, a4, is my rooks are not connected. So if this a file opens, I won't be able to fight for it, or I could lose it. Queen d2 has the advantage that I can put my queen on b4 and put pressure this way, but again, simply advancing to c6 covers that. However, instead of I will have continued contact with this c4 square, which may be the strategic situation because my queen on b4 remains in contact with that. So this maneuver, that's gonna a lot of maneuvering for nothing, or very little though. I think the move is I'm gonna have to form a turtle and play queen c3. There she remains in contact with the c4 square, discouraging that knight from coming across the border. I protect a3. I protect more importantly e6. I lose protection along the back rank. Okay, I think I'm gonna play this. I don't know if it's best, but I believe it's the most defensive maneuver. Perhaps bishop d3, which I thought about and didn't reconsider. That might have been the best move. The thought here now, obviously, is knight takes knight, bishop takes knight. If I liquidate all the pawns now, who's better? He has a pretty good break, but I have a pretty good break myself. I don't know if I agree with this, other than it does worry my knight. This pawn now sitting again in the open. But if I play knight takes knight and bishop takes knight back, he's covering the pawn. My queen, though, and bishop are holding down the fort on a3. So what if he's got a bishop, say, here, right? After these exchanges. So knight takes knight, bishop takes knight. Now I'm just going to ratchet. Oh, I can't. No, his bishop is gone. So I'm going to ratchet up pressure thusly. Now I've got two pieces attacking, one piece defending. He may move the queen over. He is sort of leading by his chin then. I believe all I need to do is bring a bishop to d2 at that point, and now the exchange is more deadly. If the bishop is there, the problem is it's not his c-pawn. You want to defend pawns with other pawns. Yeah, the bishop is really wants to be on this diagonal, but the bishop comes here. This is checkmate. Okay, so what I'm thinking is knight takes knight, bishop takes knight. I still can't find a way to engineer an attack there, but I will play my light squared bishop to the long diagonal opposing his. Let's suppose he takes bishop. I take pawn takes pawn. Now I've got a buddy next to the e6 pawn, which is good. My king is a little looser on the open G, half open G. I can defend the second rank quite easily. And the bishop is not out of the game. So I think it's still a game at that point. This is unfortunate, but let's just liquidate and try to get a position that I can understand. Okay, so here we are. Okay. Now he comes to the long. However, he doesn't have another light squared bishop. That's the only thing on the long. I agree with him. The long is where you want to be. I don't disagree. I'm not going to argue with him. Here's the pawn here. Strategically, though, he has a problem. I could play simply f4, attacking his bishop. The queen has even more scope now, all the way down to my h1 square. The scope may mean nothing, though, if she can't be backed up by a light squared bishop or a knight or something. There is a rook lift. I have the second rank covered. I put my pawn here. My pawns are all in dark squares, and that means plenty of targets for his. And my dark square bishop still is trapped, except, and it's important, there is a way to enter the game. And okay, I can snake my bishops into the game. I could defend the pawn by moving the rook back to f, his original square, keeping my pawn duo flexible. And continuing to shut the queen out and restricting her activity on this long light squared diagonal. But if I play here, then now he's got a backward and I have a backward. He's going to have to defend this backward with a heavy piece. I can defend my backward with a light piece, a minor piece. It'll have to be defended by a heavy piece, meaning the queen or a rook, if I can get pressure on this pawn, somehow occupying the light square diagonal running from a2 down to g8. If I can get my queen there and putting pressure in that pawn, then he's going to have to hold it down with a valuable piece. And I do have breaks. I have this one. But the question is, what do I do here? I can defend the pawn. I can move king f2. Now the king has been asked to actually get some work done. That would remove any protection from my h2 pawn. Potentially difficult. He's also cutting off a second rank defense himself when he's sitting on f2. I can get the pawn protected, though, with a rook all the way on h1. The king is blocking one of the dark square bishop's routes into the game. I could play here, self-pinning. Normally we don't even consider such moves, and I didn't initially, but now that I look at it, I have cut off second rank defenses. However, with my king on g2. However, black has no real way of exploiting this pin against this pawn, because he can't. Well, he could eventually. He could do. It could be a problem if I get my king awkwardly placed and he starts a pawn storm on this flank with my bishop stuck behind here. I gotta get counterplay quickly. I gotta open up lines. If I shut this down, I think this is what I'm gonna do. It comes with tempo. I think this is the move. Okay, that's okay. That's okay, but I don't know if that's best because the rook might have wanted to try to get some damage in that way. Now I need to get this going. And I need to get this bishop. Notice the queen can come pocketing in. Maybe I need to switch back now to light squares. I can do it with the tempo. This might be better. Put her back with the idea here, or bishop coming now this way. This might be the move. Just get my rooks connected, get some mobility. I want to break quickly, but I think this is the move. If the queen comes to, the question is, do I want to allow the queen to e4? She'll be protected on my e4, so my e4 square, okay? Now I'm a queen pawn player, so it's all about d4 for me, but let's face it, white, e4, d4, those are our squares. That's where we put our stuff, not black. Queen on e4. Gotta be careful, it could be a tactic. A trade of the dark square bishop's big for me. My bishop's still acting like a mobile pawn. It's fine. I'm going to move my mobile pawn here, get my rooks light-footed, connected. Now I can really think about doing something like maybe even doubling them on the A, or go against this force. If I force c6, for instance, by playing a move B, that comes again at tempo. I may want to keep the bishop here to cover a3 so the queen and the rook can leave attendance of this pawn. I'd like to keep one piece around my king. That would be this rook. So the idea then now is, can I combine against this pawn and force maybe c6? And I say force loosely. There's another move in this position. It's interesting. And that's play, it looks suicidal, c6. The idea is now the b4 pawn can't be protected by another pawn. And I can protect my c6 pawn, at least temporarily, with my queen. He can immediately put pressure on it, and I can't defend it. I could, though, if I say had my bishop on another square, such as d3, I could play this. The reason why I want to kind of provoke c6 is that now the queen really is somewhat limited. She can come, look, this is very dangerous. She can come here and here. The last move was bishop h4, so this may even be the threat. I'm just now waking up to it. There's a check. Might be time just to move the rook back and defend this. I might have to just be defending squares passively. I don't know what else to say, THS fans. Okay, I might just have to play for a draw. I've been looking for wins with pawn breaks and wacky moves like c6, but I'm going to defend this square. I think it's too dangerous. And I've got to get my queen on the light squares. Maybe that's the way to do this then. I have an accelerator square. attacking this pawn. He probably has to respond to it. Then I can come down. All my stuff is on the back rank, or I can even come here, which might be better. Going here also prevents this queen from coming into e4, which is the square I was perseverating about. But f3 is dangerous because of the proximity to my king, which I don't like. And there's a break coming. And another break. There's a break coming here. Potentially another break coming here. And heavy pieces coming here. If I move my rook to... I'm going to see if I can take my time. I'm still going off the plan. The queen is not going to checkmate me herself, and she can't get to h1 herself. So, bishop to d2. Trying to get my bishop better, more actively. I really want to trade off the dark square bishops. So, because he's going to target my pawns. Queen f3 allows the bishop to come here, check. Okay, so I think it might just be bishop b2. It's a little scary. Let's say he goes queen f3, thinking there is something. Then rook f1. Now I'm threatening the queen and I'm protecting my f2 square. Let's go for it. I don't know, it's... This pawn is going to have to be guarded by the rook on a1. What if I bring the rook here to the second rank? And again, just leave, because if his rook is attacking my a pawn, but I've got it covered by a bishop, then I've got 4 points of material tying down 5 points of material in the person of the rook. Rook a2 has the benefit of I can swing the rook to g2, and I control the half-open file and have an active rook. What I can't do is put that rook on f2 if he goes queen. If he goes queen here, he's got challenges himself. He's got, a problem himself. This is not a minor thing. Now I'm leaning here. I'm leaning here, and I'm leaning here, and keep the bishop in place, covering the two weaknesses. Yeah, I do want to snake my bishop and trade. That takes me time, and it accomplishes nothing in terms of... Let's see what he does. Oh yeah, okay. He's taking advantage of the fact that the bishop is undefended on a2, and yeah, and the queen is on it. Why couldn't he just take it with the queen? Did I just drop it? Rook a2. Why didn't he just take it with the queen? I think I just dropped my rook. For the love of God. I didn't even think about that. The game is becoming a disaster. Maybe he thinks he has more than just queen takes rook. Maybe this is... I gotta defend the rook. I can defend it from here, here, or here. If I go here, that's a fork, so that's not a defense. If I go here, I think the move is here. Here, I got too much dark square coverage. I don't understand why he didn't take that. I don't understand what's going on. Not the first time. Why didn't he just take the rook? Rook a2. I have this dark square. I own it. Queen f3. The game's kind of ruined if he didn't take my rook, to be honest. Because how can I say I won against a knight-tender bot when I dropped a rook for nothing? Those are the questions we have to ask ourselves. My rook a little awkward, but look. Check. Queen here, maybe. I'm sort of losing it a little bit because of that. This rook is in trouble. Not doing anything here. Going back and forth. Sometimes computers have difficulty in closed situation, but this situation is not closed. He's got every avenue and opportunity for success. Won't I just eventually pick this thing up? What about queen here? He'll defend it with a rook, that's fine. Queen here, what would be really nice for me now would be a queen on c4. Sometimes fantasies like that can come true. I have had the feeling that I need to get my queen on a light square for some time as I misplay this whole situation. I'm not up material. I don't know whether I'm playing for a draw or I'm losing, but why didn't he take the rook? That's going to be the great question. So, okay, queen c2. He's running rampant on these light squares. But if I take it, isn't that going to be essentially the end of the road for that? Pawn. He's preventing me from playing rook b1. But hey, you know, if he doesn't want to take the rook, then put the heavy piece behind the pass pawn. Then what? If he tries to defend it with a rook, he's kind of threatening this. But I have a check. I don't. He's defending this, preventing the rook from coming. I might have to just blockade. This is the safest move and the one that I'm gonna play. There could be eventually a sacrifice here, and something like that could happen. Now he's lifting. I think I want the queens off, but as soon as I move my queen away, it's going very poorly for the men in white hats. I'm playing passively. I'm confused. I am tying down the rook, though. No counterplay. He's gonna play here, and that is violent. I might have to resign. I might have to say this is it. In a very difficult situation. Good learning, though. This is how we learn. Okay, so the threat is checkmate. I did, to my own credit, I did see this Rick lift a long time ago My king cannot run. I think this could be it now that I'm looking at it. How do I stop? How do I get out of my... How do I fix this issue? I'm going to have to resign here. I could be resigning prematurely. There might be a solution. My rook could sidestep. My king could sidestep and move my rook out of the way. So, try to protect everything. This rook will come down. Oh, it's going to get vicious. But my king might be safe on f1. My instinct then is to put the rook on d1, protecting the queen. But if I stay on the dark squares and just concede all the light squares to him, the problem with the rook on d1 is now my king can't run. The reason I like my rook on c1 is I could try to steal a pawn while I'm being checkmated. Relying on this lateral defense. I said the queen was not going to be effective on the light squares unless she had help, and well, the help is arriving. The good news about the rook on c1 too, it's protected by the bishop. It's pathetic. I don't think I need to protect my queen because she is mobile. This is going to get really ugly. It'll be queen h1 check maybe. No, there. And now that's it. Well done to Javier. Not a good game for me. Devastating. I had 5 mistakes, 3 blunders. My goodness. Well, we'll put it up for the H's on YouTube. This is a good opportunity for you to learn how not to play chess. We'll get them tomorrow. And that's it. Ta-ta, chess fans.